You are tuning in to the Atlanta Realtors Rundown, the official podcast for the Atlanta Realtors. We're here to keep you updated with the latest trends, topics, and keep you in the know of our ever-changing Atlanta market. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Well, welcome back, everyone. My name is Matt LaMarsh. I am your host for today's episode of the Atlanta Realtors Rundown. I really appreciate you being here. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode of everything Atlanta real estate here on the Rundown. Today, I am beyond ecstatic to have our guest today in studio. He's no stranger to like a podcast radio environment, and as soon as you read the title of this, you'll understand why. But just super excited to sit down and talk everything Atlanta real estate, of course, but also just to give people a little more context for your journey and how you got here today. So without further ado, Mr. Jimmy Barron, thank you so much for joining us, ma'am.
Great to be here.
Well, I really appreciate it. And as I said, a staple, not just in Atlanta radio, but radio period.
It was a lightning strike when we were on the air back in the 90s and 2000s. I was on a station formerly known as 99X for those who maybe grew up here. I mean, it hasn't been on the air in a long time now. So millennials and Gen Ys and Zs or whatever the Gen is now have no idea. But if you were in high school in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, or in college, you probably listened to our station.
Absolutely.
Our show was The Morning X with Barnes, Leslie, and Jimmy. We were on for 13 years, and it was a great run. 13 years is a long time in radio.
It is. Well, and as a teenager and into my early 20s during that time, I was an avid listener and called in a couple times. And,
really?
Absolutely.
Was it just for a contest, or did you ever actually have content?
No, there was. I'm a real estate agent. I've always got something to say.
Tell me what you called in about. I wonder if and I know you'd think it would be difficult to believe I would remember one phone call, but I might.
So, you guys used to talk about news and recent events and stuff like that. And there was something that I was like, no, they got this wrong. I need to put and I'm sure it was like after a big award show or something. You guys were ripping on some celebrity, and I'm like, no, I've seen that guy. I've met that guy. He's different than that. And I never got through. I did get through for a contest.
Oh, you didn't get through? Oh, those calls I wouldn't. Yeah, I would not know a call that never made it to me.
There's a reason. Yeah.
Okay.
But no, I as you said, 13 years is amazing, and obviously radio has taken a very different path now, not just locally, but syndication and everything else is very, very different now. And of course, a ton of different media is coming out now, and mediums are being used, at a very local level as well as national. So talk to us a little bit about your history, about how you got to Atlanta. I know you were born in Chicago, right?
Right.
Cool. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's a lot more than just radio. I believe there's some maybe risky business in there.
There was some acting. I mean, I'll try to give you the most abbreviated version of it. I grew up in Chicago. I went to L.A. in 1979 to be an actor, and I pursued that career for about 5 or 6 years. I had a couple of successes. I was in a couple of TV shows and movies. I had a scene in Risky Business, and I was on The Facts of Life and Quincy and Heart to Heart and, those shows from the 80s. And then ended up, so one of the things I did while I was trying to make a living as an actor was I drove a taxi. And then I went and drive a limousine, and because it enables you the flexibility to go on auditions and whatever. And one day I got a thing in the mail. UCLA was offering these. They had these extension courses you could take at night for credit. I mean, they were basket weaving courses that no people would just take them just so they get a credit. One of them was called Personality Radio. How to be an on-air radio personality.
Interesting.
Never gave it any thought. I wasn't one of these kids who grew up always listening to the radio, and I always used to listen to the DJs, and not me at all. And I thought to myself, well, I'm in my car all day listening to these guys, and it does sound like fun. I'll bet that would be something. That would be fun to do. I think I could do that. And I took this course. The guy who taught it, it turned out, was a fairly significant consultant in the business who was making some extra money teaching this UCLA course. And he and I struck up a friendship, and, I would make tapes. I mean, back then, I literally would make tapes in my living room on cassettes, And through him, I met, he got me an interview at a radio station. I started my career out there in Simi Valley, California, and then went to Oxnard, and then I got a job, this is all off air, I got a job as a producer in San Diego. Worked a couple of stations there for a couple of years, then back to Chicago for a year on a very big radio show. Jonathan Brandmeier, who's a legend in Chicago radio, I was his producer. And then an opportunity came up to be a producer for the morning show on a new radio station in Atlanta called 99X. And I didn't want to take it at first because it was alternative. It was an alternative radio station. I'd only worked on classic rock stations, and I was very closed-minded. And I was like, well, I can't work at an alternative station. I don't even know that music. I don't. And the truth is, it doesn't matter in the morning when you do what I did, because we had a very, our show, as you know, was really more about personality and interviews and games and, having fun and talk. And anyway, I came down for the interview, and they hired me, and I was just off air. I was just the off-air producer at the time on this new morning show. It was Leslie Fram and this another gentleman, Sean Demery. And so I was there to try to make them, because I had a reputation in the business at that point as being a good morning show producer. And I could book guests, I could put together contests, I could, write bits, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, it wasn't a great show, and occasionally I would have to come on air and, pop on the mic and set up a bit or, just add my 2 cents.
Yeah.
So it became apparent at some point that, so Sean, who is a great DJ, rest his soul, he passed away a couple of years ago, but he really was never meant for morning radio. He was really an afternoon guy. And on occasion, he would go on vacation. The afternoon guy, whose name was Steve Barnes, would come and take his place, and it would be Steve Barnes and Leslie Fram, and then occasionally me. And I became more of the show, and eventually a light went on in the program director's head and said, what, this show sounds good. Let's do this. Let's make this a show.
Yeah.
And we were fortunate, and we were on there for 13 years, and then I had a little bit of a break and was on Dave FM for a couple of years. But the Morning X was a very significant show, not just in Atlanta radio, but as you mentioned, we, because at the time, a lot of the modern rock, a lot of the alternative music was first being played in Atlanta. And 99X had a very big national reputation. So because we were the morning show, which is the biggest show, we were kind of the, we were the lightning rod.
Yeah. I love it. Well, and you actually answered one of my questions, which was, can you go from one style or genre of music to another? And as you mentioned in the morning show, it's a little bit different. And that's what I loved about 99X and other morning shows was the personalities. Because, when you've only got the voice to go on, and I'm sure this resonates with podcasters and people that listen to podcasts all the time, you start to feel like you know those people, even by only hearing their voice.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt, after listening to you guys for years was, I think if I walked into that studio right now, we would be friends. Like, we would probably have a lot of commonalities just based on what I've heard from you.
And I would hear all the time, and I still meet people who say, oh my gosh, I feel like I know you so well. And I mean, the goal when you're, any type of on-air personality is you're not broadcasting to people.
Right.
You're talking with people.
It's a conversation.
It's a conversation.
Yeah.
I don't have a radio voice. What do you like on the radio? I'm, very much the same on the radio. I mean, Howard Stern once said that the real him is the radio him.
Right.
Like people would say, well, what's he really like? And he would say, no, that's what I'm really like because I don't have to be filtered when I'm on the radio. When I'm off the air, that's when I have to filter myself and watch what I say and be polite. But how I really am inside my head, that's what you get on the radio.
I love it. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. So Obviously, after a successful career in radio and broadcast and television and movies and everything else, I mean, there's probably a lot of different directions you could have gone, a lot of different things you could have done.
No.
I know a lot.
No, that's actually what a lot of people assume. The truth of the matter is that doing a morning radio show I was on the air, my career was 22 years, is great. We did a lot of cool things, met a lot of neat people, did a lot of things that are very memorable, but it gave me almost no transferable skills. Really, because after my career, I was like, well, what am I really trained to do here?
Sure.
Can I go get a job at a bank, at UPS? Well, they're not really looking for someone who can give away David Bowie tickets. They're not looking for funny people.
Sure.
So what can I do? I have no college education.
Right.
And it turns out that the one, I would say, transferable skill is that being able to relate to people and talk with people and listen to people. I've done thousands of interviews on the radio, and it teaches you how to talk to people. And that is probably the most important skill to have in not just real estate, but in a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
But as far as actual physical skill, none.
So how did you go? I mean, obviously there was some separation, and then all of a sudden you just stumbled into how did this whole thing get kicked off?
So I was fired from my last job at Dave FM. It was 2 days before my 50th birthday.
Oh, gosh.
And it was really a kick in the stomach for a minute.
Sure.
Because very shortly after, feeling that gut punch, I realized, and this was one of the few times in my life that I had a real lucid, smartest guy in the room epiphany.
Sure.
I realized that the only thing that could suck worse than getting fired 2 days before my 50th birthday would be getting fired 2 days before my 60th birthday. And in radio, the only thing you know for sure in radio is that you're going to get fired. At some point, you're getting fired. Right. All right. So, I realized I'd been on 2 stations. I had a 2-year-old son at the time, or 3-year-old son. I wasn't going to move from Atlanta. Probably wouldn't get another job in Atlanta. I'm not a sports talk host. I'm not a country music guy. I'm not, who's going to hire me? I need to do something.
Sure.
Had no idea. I actually started a little video business for a while that I didn't like. And my mom said, she said, you should go get your real estate license. And I said, Mom, don't ever say that to me again. That's the worst idea you've ever had. I said, get my real estate license?
Yeah.
I'm Jimmy Barron. I tell jokes. I've sat in the room with the Dalai Lama. I'm not a realtor. I'm not going to walk around. I'm not going to have a business card with my picture on it.
Right.
Holding up a business card now with my picture on it. And she said, well, you know what? You've bought an investment property before, right? I said, yes. She said, well, why don't you get your license just so next time if you buy a property, you'll have more information and you can do it yourself. I said, okay, that makes sense.
Sure. I like it.
And the more I learned about it, the more I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed learning about it. I thought it was kind of interesting and cool. And I've always been a very curious person. I think that's what made me good in radio, is having a curiosity, always wanting to know things. And I had a very good friend. His name is Mark Golden. He has a boutique firm in Toco Hills called the Golden Group, and he's very successful. And he said, why don't you come work for me? He did a lot of property management and sales. And I shadowed Mark for a year or two and learned about real estate, learned the conversation of real estate, learned how to read contracts, learned the verbiage, how to relate to clients. And it was a great learning. Experience. Then I moved to where I am now, where there was more formal education, which is what I needed.
I love it. Well, and so the two things I really want to kind of zero in on here. So the first was the transferable skill of communication, because I
Yeah.
think that's so underrated. But then the second, and especially to, the consumers maybe that are thinking about getting their license or have ever kind of been down the same road that you have, where they're finishing one career, starting another, or thinking about starting another, or maybe they don't want to officially retire. Maybe they want to be more semi-retired. I'd love to dig into that a little bit more, but let's go back to communication. So I'm with you. I think if you want to master one skill in this business, it's that.
In life.
In life, you're right. You're right. So talk to us a little more about that. How did radio really benefit you in your real estate career when it comes to communication? Because you mentioned curiosity, which I think is a great skill for life as well. If you're constantly curious, if you're constantly learning, in real estate, as you know, the market's always changing, but the education is, and so are the contracts and everything else. So you have to remain curious, I feel like, to be effective. But talk to us about the communication component, what you kind of learned from radio, how that translated into your real estate career.
Well, I think I got into radio. I think, I didn't learn how to be a decent communicator in radio. I mean, I think you have to have that to get into radio, and I think it helps. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've met in my life who are like, hey, I think I'd be good on the radio, and and it's like it's not that easy.
Right.
Making it sound easy
Right.
is what makes you good.
Absolutely.
If you think, oh my gosh, it's so easy what those guys do. They just go in there and tell jokes. They, it's not easy,
Right.
and that's why there are only a few that are successful at it. But like with anything, I mean, I don't care what it is. It looks, Freddie Freeman makes it look easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's not,
Exactly.
But because I think I was always a curious person and made me want to talk to people, I enjoy making people laugh. I enjoy making people smile and, and have fun when they're with me, which is what radio is all about.
Yep.
And I do think that in real estate, when you're dealing with, with people, they want to enjoy being with you. You have to know your stuff.
Right.
You have to be educated. You have to, people want to know, they want the confidence to know that their realtor either knows what he or she is talking about or is resourceful enough to find the answers.
For sure.
So you really have to have a confidence. And so, but they have to like you. And what is radio? Well, people don't like you don't have good ratings.
Right.
So, I always studied stand-up comedians, and I was a big fan of sitcoms and talk shows, and things that are and listening and watching interview shows because I enjoyed it, and maybe that kind of planted seeds in what people respond to.
Yeah. Well, and I think, as media has shifted, really we're talking about attention at the end of the day, right? Like the attention went away from audio as it relates to radio programming into podcasting and into YouTube and to a lot of it. People just went in different directions.
Well, yeah, for me, it was, this was 2000 and, what was it? It was 2011, right? It was 2011 when I left my last job. And the handwriting was on the wall. Radio contracts were getting shorter. The money wasn't as much because of things like podcasting and the internet. Advertisers were sinking money into those platforms, so there wasn't as much money coming into radio.
Sure.
So, the timing really worked out. I hate to say it, but I have a lot of friends in radio right now who are miserable. But they don't know where, I've been doing it for 20, 25 years. They don't know what to do.
Sure.
And it's not easy. And I'm going to tell you, a lot of people who I've spoken with, when they've seen my career trajectory, have said, well, of course Jimmy was able to make it in radio. People knew who he was. It was easy. He had, the minute it's a totally reasonable assumption that because I had some name recognition that immediately I would have clients and business and blah, blah, blah. It was the opposite. it was the total opposite, much to my surprise, because I was one of those people who thought this should be easy.
Yeah.
You know, when people know you as one thing for so long, and that one thing is being like a joker and a funny guy and a wise guy and, you know, an entertainer, they maybe think it's cool to talk to you, and they want to hear stories about, you know, having dinner with Elton John or whatever.
Right.
But they don't want you to sell their house. You know, they're not asking you to sell their $2 million house just because you've been on the radio.
Sure.
They want someone who knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And so I had best friends who my first couple of years bought or sold homes, and they used other realtors. And I was hurt, and it even caused a wedge. I do take that stuff personally.
Sure.
I understand it now.
Yeah.
So people couldn't see me in another light. Most of my clients early in my career were people who had no idea I was ever on the air or on the radio. I met them in an open house or door knocking, and that's how I got a lot of my business. I would not even mention my previous career.
Yeah, interesting. Well, that's the reason I laughed, is because I assumed as well, man, huge following, right? Tons of people listening to you day in and day out for years. Surely it was just like flip of a switch, right? The business just poured in and people couldn't stop calling and emailing. But you're right. I think that's and I've heard that's been a common theme in a lot of very successful agents that I've talked to, is that they were really, really good at something else. They came into real estate assuming they were going to have a great book of business to pull from. Very, very rarely does that actually work out. Very, very rarely. And the common theme, exactly like you said, has been experience. Like, people want someone that is going to give them certainty in a transaction, whether you're buying or selling, right? They want to know every step of the way. They want the education, they want the information, but they also want you to know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So kind of moving along those same lines, talk to us a little bit about your real estate career. What have you learned? What's been maybe the biggest surprise to you about real estate, but also what are you currently working on? I know you do a lot of luxury stuff here in Buckhead and Sandy Springs and stuff, which is a thriving area for that segment. But talk to us a little more about real estate in general, your career, just all of it. Let's
all
dig
of
in.
it. Holy cow! Here's all of it. I mean, you know, my area of town is primarily Sandy Springs, Dunwoody, Buckhead, you know, and now further north as people are starting to leave Sandy Springs, Dunwoody, and Buckhead. And, you know, I mean, all of a sudden I'm selling homes in Swanee and Cumming and, you know, all points north, like a lot of people. But it's been, I think the biggest surprise to me is that I can do this. I mean, the biggest surprise to me has been, you know, I mean, I remember I used to look at some of the numbers that I would see successful realtors, you know, do. And I don't mean like Glennis Beecham numbers that are, you know, like in the stratosphere, but, you know, still, you know, solid six-figure numbers. And I'd be like, how am I going to ever, you know, I can't do that. So to me, the surprise has been just that I have those skills I didn't think I had 13 years ago or 11 years ago, I've somehow been able to use, you know, or find. And so it's been, I also didn't think that I would find as much personal satisfaction in making people happy. You know, you really are, you know, I say on the back of my business card, and I stole this from someone a long time ago. I saw it and I thought, I want that. It says, helping you make great real estate decisions that will improve the quality of your life. It's like a powerful statement.
It is. And
you really are. I mean, occasionally it might be a situation where it's a divorce or, a death or something like that, or, foreclosure. But typically, you are helping people get to a better place in life. And that's a real satisfying feeling, and I really enjoy that, and it makes me feel this isn't just about commission.
Yeah.
I do love the idea and focusing on this not being a transactional career. There are some who have transactional businesses, and that's fine. That's not what I'm looking to do. I tell people, like, I don't want to help you buy a house. I want to help you buy all your houses. And if I don't do a good job on the first one, I'm not going to help you or your friends on the rest of them. And that's what I'm about.
Yeah.
I was at the the company I'm not supposed to name has an event called Family Reunion, and I was watching a speaker once, and they were a very successful team out of Washington or someplace like that. And they talked about how their business is built on just catering and spending their marketing dollars on their database, 100-person database, 200-person database. That's it. You don't need to spend $10,000 a month for the back page of the Business Chronicle. You don't need to do billboards. You don't need to do this, that, Zillow, all that stuff. That if you focus and love the people who you know will refer you, you can have a huge business. And that's what I'm constantly trying to remind myself to do.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Well, again, I feel like there's just a million different directions we could go in, but for me, I love what you mentioned there as well. I think the relationship-driven business is something I've tried to build as well, and it's hard. And it takes a lot longer than the transactional. I mean, like you said, you can go spend $10,000 and get a ton of leads and go convert them and be done and finish. But at the end of the day, the money is really just changing hands and changing names. There's no personality, if that makes sense, behind the business, I guess. And that's one thing I've always tried to do with my business is create an environment where the people in that database all know and like each other and work with each other. And I've got contractors in my database. I've got people that, constantly need my referrals as well.
Yeah, exactly. And, I like when I get a text, I got a text actually this morning from someone who I helped a couple of years ago find a condo, and he asked me, "Hey, do you know any good HOA attorneys?" Okay, obviously, I don't know. Maybe there's a sale coming up there. But the point is, like, to be a resource for your clients that cannot be. I just can't overstate how important that is. And when I sit down with clients, especially if it's a listing appointment, I want them to know, I got plumbers, I got carpenter, electricians, movers, all of the above. I'm your one-stop shop for resources. The average person doesn't have that.
Correct. Yeah, that's so true. So anything that surprised you in a bad way about real estate? Anything that you're like, man, if someone had told me about this in real estate, I would have never gotten my license?
Well, not so much that. Well, I'll tell you the two things that have been, that we all deal with. But people don't take realtors. We still, for whatever reason, and this is something it's our job to convert. As you know, people still think this is an easy job. People think they don't need a realtor because they got Zillow. And, I tell people all the time, we could be looking for a house for a year. And when we finally find a house for a year, I tell them, I know you're going to find this hard to believe, but that was the easy part. Like finding the property or finding the buyer, like that's actually that part that you thought was impossible. That's the easy part.
Right.
Getting from contract to close, that's where I do my work.
Yep.
And that's where you can get hurt as a buyer or seller if you don't have someone, quarterbacking. And people who will, clients who will tell you, I've sold 5 houses. I know how this goes. When's the last time you sold a house? 25 years ago. It's different now.
Things have changed.
Things have changed. How long was how many pages was the contract when you bought this house?
Right.
2. Now it's about 24. So people still don't give us the same credibility as a doctor or a lawyer or any other profession. And still always second guess us. But that's just that's part of it. I have also noticed, and this is just because, all these real estate shows on TV, right? What have people done over the last 2 years during COVID? They sit and they watch Flip That Whatever, and then they go, oh, I can get my real estate license. And the generation now of people who expect to be paid for everything and who expect to be making a lot of money right away. This is not a career that you're going to make a lot of money if you don't go in feet first, like, jump, you got to dive in. You got to be all in.
Yeah.
Can you make some pocket money as the cul-de-sac agent? Yeah, I guess you probably could.
Sure.
But if you want to make a lot of money, you can't be doing this and also, opening up a fitness studio and also having a music career and also pursuing all kinds of other side gigs. And I meet people like that. I've had people who want to kind of learn under me and have me shadow them, and then I find out they're doing other things. I'm not interested, because the minute you get, a gig, the real estate's gonna.
Yeah.
So I've had people I've had young agents who have asked, hey, can you host an open house this weekend, and have said, yes, just so you know, I charge $100 or whatever. I'm like, that wouldn't have even crossed my mind when I get in the business.
Yeah.
Like, you get paid to host an open. I mean, this is where you're learning. This is where you're going to pick up, possibly clients.
For sure.
I mean, I'm giving you an opportunity.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I think it might be a generational thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think, especially you mentioned the last 2 years. The last 2 years has kind of thrown everyone into a spin, right? Good, bad, or otherwise. And I think what you mentioned there earlier too is really important. That if you want to build a business out of this career, out of this world that we live in, that is residential or even commercial real estate, what you focus on expands, right? And if your focus is split, because I'm coming from a personal experience where there was 3 months where I owned one business and tried to do it was impossible. It was
that
impossible.
saying. There's that saying: a dog that chases 2 rabbits won't catch either of them.
Exactly.
And that's it. You
Exactly.
you can be mediocre at 2 businesses if you want, or you can be really successful.
Well,
at one.
and I think this is where some self-reflection for everyone, right, goes into, ultimately, what do you want out of this? Because it's just like everything else. Whatever you put in is what you'll get out. And if you're a part-time agent and only want to be a part-time agent, there's a place for you. Now, you may not make a ton of money, and you may not be, a great business 10 years from now, but there's always a spot for that. And it really, I think the comparison that you mentioned earlier is very easy for new agents to get sucked up into. That, well, Jimmy's selling $30 million a year in real estate, and this guy over here is brand new, and he's only been in the business for a year, and he's selling $10 million. That to me is like probably the worst thing about our space, is that people get distracted by that.
Yes.
And a lot of people play that comparison game, which I think can be to their detriment in a lot of cases. But
And the truth is, maybe why that is because it's one of the few careers that you don't need a formal education, years of college, to do very, very well. And so people immediately assume that means it's easy.
Right.
Well, it's not. It's still a lot of work, and it's still hard, and you're still going to, lose a lot of times. But, the attrition, hopefully, like the last 2 years, the market's been flooded with people who, thought it would be fun, and now they go back to work, and I'm sure that we'll probably lose a lot. But that's good, because it's not good for our business to have a lot of mediocrity out there.
Agreed. I agree. All right. So, in kind of closing up the conversation here, and I, again, really appreciate your time and insight and wisdom from all facets of life. But kind of in closing here.
Said no one ever to me.
Well, I just
Yeah,
did, so
okay,
I'll be
yeah,
the
all
first
right,
one. I'm happy
all
to
right.
take that trophy. In closing, let's talk a little bit about professionalism, but also, and I think one thing that you do really, really well is stand out in a good way, because there's a very low bar, as you mentioned, and I think honestly, like you mentioned earlier, the expectation is very low. One step above used car salesman. No offense to any used car salesman out there, basically, right?
No, and by the way, you're quoting polls. Like
Right,
polls have
right.
said that. This isn't something that you just
Right, exactly.
came up with.
So how do we stand out as realtors, but also adding a layer of professionalism, because it is up to us to communicate our value. It is up to us to communicate to our current clients, past clients, and future clients what makes us different. Why should you choose a Matt LaMarsh, a Jimmy Barron? Why how can we stand out, and why do we how do we get these people to actually listen to our advice and take our experience seriously?
So, there are a couple things. First of all, understand that you're opening a business, okay? You're not an employee anymore. You are the business. Invest in your business.
Yeah.
Invest in nice clothes. Like, when I see people, men, hosting open houses or showing property in shorts, and forgive me, you may, I don't know.
No.
To me, that, and maybe it might be old school, but I like, shorts are not what professionals wear, unless you're a tennis player.
Even if
So-
it's 100 degrees in Atlanta, Georgia?
Even if it's 100 degrees in Atlanta.
Okay.
My father was in sales, which I don't consider myself in sales. People have asked me since I left radio, how do you like sales? And I always tell them, not for one day have I ever felt like I was in sales. Because I feel like, first of all, I'm not selling anything. I'm helping this person find a good home for their family. I'm helping this person find someone who will buy their home. And maybe I'm more of a consultant, but I don't feel like I'm in sales.
Yeah.
And so, you're, my dad was in sales, left the house every day in a suit and tie. No, this was in the 60s,
Sure.
okay? So it's a different time. But I don't think what's different now is what a professional looks like. When I go to meet with people, I'm always wearing a suit, maybe not a tie if I don't want to look too intimidating. If I'm meeting with someone who thinks who might think I look too much like a shark, or too sharp, maybe I'll tone it down.
Sure.
But, dress like a professional. You don't show homes in shorts or workout gear. It's not men too. I see, women too, running around in their athleisure wear with, they just came from the gym or a tennis lesson. I don't feel that's appropriate.
Sure.
I mean, it's fine. I just don't think you're taken seriously.
Sure.
So, be available to the clients. I've taken classes where I've seen people say, you know what, you have to set boundaries that, I don't answer calls after 5 o'clock. That's family time. And I don't, I go 9 to 5 and then I'll call you first thing in the morning. But after 5, that's fine. I don't believe in that because I may not answer my phone after, or if I don't answer my phone after 5 or 6 o'clock, another agent will. And that agent will be me, by the way.
Sure.
Someone calls me at 11 o'clock at night, and I'm okay talking to them, I'll answer them. If they call me tomorrow at 11 o'clock at night and I don't feel like talking to them, I won't talk. I won't. I'll call you in the morning, whatever.
Sure.
But I think you have to be available for your clients. As you know, if you want to make if you want to get a lot of business, plan a lot of vacations. Because what do we all know? That
true.
the day before you go on vacation, your phone's going to ring off the hook with every buyer you've been working with who all of a sudden found a house they want to buy, listing appointments, all that. So I said, I'll just plan more vacations and my phone will ring more. But I do end up working on vacation because that's how that's the only way Daddy can afford to take us on vacations. Now, will I draw boundaries within that? Yes.
Sure.
I mean, I have one of the worst memories I have of being a realtor on vacation. I took my son to Jekyll Island, and he was out playing in the water, splashing around in the ocean. And he's yelling to me. He was probably only about 8, and he's like, Daddy, come on in. Daddy, come on. Let's play in the waves. Come on. And I'm on the beach on the phone, negotiating an amendment to address concerns for an hour. And it was the deadline was today, and it was complicated and whatever. It's going to happen occasionally, but that's the difference between having a career and a job.
Yep.
So, but be professional. Speak professional. Don't swear when you're talking to clients. Don't curse, even if they are.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's not professional.
Yeah, I like it. What a great place to end it. Well, thank you so much, first and foremost, for taking the time to come in and talk with us about this. And I'm sure we're going to have a wonderful response from everyone that's been listening today's podcast episode. And I just appreciate you pouring back in. Really means
Pleasure.
a lot.
Pleasure.
I love what you said earlier, and I'll finish with this. But you mentioned, and I think I took a CE course where our initial post license was, and I was sitting there and I was watching you speak to this group of 30 or so new agents, and what you just said was exactly right. You said, it's a very serious business, but I could immediately tell this about you. There was some levity that you added to it,
You have
and
to.
I think. Not only the people that were there taking that class, but also your clients, other agents. Like, we run into people all day, every single day, and the communication, that little bit of levity is what I took away from it. I really appreciate you for that. So
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to the Atlanta Realtors Rundown. Please subscribe, and for more information on how to get engaged, check us out at atlantarealtors.com. We look forward to having you join us for the next episode.